Napoleon as a movie fails to reach the heights conquered by the titular man, falling, well, short. This is Exasperated Nerd Explains. The scope. There are several ways to approach a biopic. You can try to encompass the majority of the historical figure's life, giving broad strokes and showcasing major events, or you can focus in on a singular point, a moment of crisis, which can reveal their strengths and weaknesses. Think Alexander for the former and Lincoln for the latter. The results are not always so stark, as Alexander is widely and correctly panned, while Lincoln is celebrated. But it is the most important decision to make when it comes to a biopic, as it is the jumping off point. The problem with trying to tackle the former in a feature-length film is that sometimes there is simply too much. My life can fit rather easily in a 2-hour film, not much to it, but Napoleon's life is filled with so many historically significant events that the movie feels like it's just jumping around the whole time, trying to cover specific things. As an example, he was in over 60 battles, and in this movie we only really see 3 in any detail: Toulon, Austerlitz, and Waterloo. The Egypt campaign is literally what you see in the trailer. They shoot the pyramids with a cannon and the Egyptian commander has a heart attack. I don't count Moscow since it wasn't a battle, nor the little bit of harassing fire Napoleon's army receives from Cossacks as they march into the country. I know the 3 they chose are obviously key battles, but that selection leaves out so much else. He conquers the Iberian Peninsula and puts his brother on the throne, and that isn't even mentioned. Another example is Tsar Alexander, obviously an important figure of the time. He is first mentioned as a potential ally that needs a friend via a fellow ruler in Europe. The next time he's mentioned, Napoleon is mad that his friend has betrayed him. It was jarring to have this supposed friendship begin and end entirely off screen when it was seemingly important. And some of this may be fixed in the 4-hour cut that's going to come, but I can only go off of what they actually released. These are just a few examples, but the entire film is like that. I understand the why, because you need to craft a narrative around the man, but just going from event to event makes it feel listless, and try as they might, they were not entirely successful on that point. The narrative. The beauty of fiction is that it can be extremely clean. You can tie things up nicely, start and end wherever you please without any criticism. Take one of Ridley Scott's previous films, Gladiator. I think it's a great film that works. It also has battles, political intrigue, and an emotional heart to the story. You have characters, conflict, and clear motivations all interacting with each other, making a strong narrative force which propels the film to its conclusion. It's like carving a statue out of marble. You are limited only by your abilities. When it comes to a historical film, even though filmmakers often treat the history as the ugly stepchild, you are still wildly constrained by real events. It's like trying to graft a skeleton onto an already completed statue and chipping away at parts you don't like to make some semblance of a movie, which, if you're not careful, will look more Elephant Man than David. They decided to make the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine the heart of the film, which I understand, but ultimately makes parts of the film fall flat or feel rushed. Her death really should be the climax, and his reaction to it the emotional end of the movie, but that happened before Waterloo, and you need Waterloo. So it's one of those things that everyone knows and obviously is significant in his life, but by focusing so much of the movie on their relationship, having a big climactic battle immediately afterwards made it feel like both Josephine's death and the battle were unimportant, because the narrative was torn between telling this point in history and what they decided to focus on. Also, in the scene where Napoleon learns of Josephine's death, he is speaking to his ex-stepdaughter that Josephine had before they were together, and I think this character appeared in one prior scene. For delivering this important news, it felt like suddenly random extra is now integral. In the theatrical cut, I'm fairly certain they never spoke a word to each other before this scene. Maybe it's realistic, but having the revelation of, oh, that's who he's talking to, in the middle of the scene should not be the focus, and felt sloppy. Also, frankly, I'm not going to Napoleon for the Napoleon and Josephine movie. I'm going for Napoleon, the General and Emperor. I think it would have felt like a cleaner narrative if the focus was more on his ambition and desire to conquer. The relationship with Josephine would still factor into, obviously, as it was important, and the decisions he made to get an heir were tied up with it, but they would have made Waterloo feel more like the climax, like his last chance to get back and attain power. Instead, though the battle scene was pretty good, there was no emotional impact in his defeat. The portrayal. I really thought Joaquin Phoenix was portraying Napoleon as autistic or someone with Asperger's. He was just so awkward and weird throughout the movie. I heard someone else say that he felt like the Joker but as Napoleon, or that maybe those awkward scenes were supposed to be a still insecure 20-something-year-old, but it felt weird since it was being portrayed by a 49-year-old Joaquin Phoenix. It also felt like Napoleon had no real agency, like he was just swept up in the events of his life without any say. There were literally scenes of someone suggesting, oh, you should be part of this 3-person consulate to rule, and then later another scene where someone suggests, oh, you should be king. And before, it's like these ideas had never occurred to him, and they didn't come from him. It feels like he just goes along with it. The same thing with his need for an heir. It feels like nothing comes from his own motivation. The scenes are laid out as if he is the pawn, but it doesn't follow through on that point either. We are introduced to Napoleon as someone who wants a chance to prove himself when he is given command to take Toulon, but we never really see him advocating for this on his own behalf, apart from maybe when he awkwardly tried to establish the consul. I have no idea what he actually wanted to do other than continue to see Josephine. Also, he did not feel charismatic as a leader. There is a small scene where he's giving bread to the troops as they march into Russia, but other than that, there's no real reason to believe that the troops would go against their orders and follow him after he returns from his first exile. There is zero time devoted to his changes to the country domestically that would make the people want to follow him either. I don't see how anyone would want to follow the Napoleon as he is portrayed throughout the film. There could have been other scenes to build this up, but if they were there, they did not make the theatrical cut. Overall, the movie started off strong, with the Toulon battle, I think, the strongest scene, but as it went on, I felt the length of this 2.5-hour feature. It was too torn between trying to have a romance at the heart of the film and also portray the historical high points to really do either part of his life with great success. I know there's a lot of historically dubious or incorrect points, even from my mostly cursory knowledge of Napoleon, but there's a lot where I'm more curious about if things actually happened the way as it was shown in the film than I was actually enjoying the movie. It's not a bad movie, but it is certainly not a good one either. I don't see myself ever wanting to sit down and watch this version at least again. I may give the 4-hour cut a try, but I don't see how it could really save this movie unless it massively reframes it. But what do you think? Let me know what you thought of the film in the comments below. If you've made it to the end, please consider subscribing to the channel to get future or past content. Like the video and share it with others to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching. Bye.